All right, we're live here, episode 24, the Kobe Bryant episode, right? 24. Joined here by a very special guest in Peter Pettis. What's going on, sir? How are you?
I'm great. Can't complain. Happy Sunday, peeps.
And listen, before we start, though, I'm sure for the people noticing, is bald Lucas back? Is quarantine hair Lucas back? The answer is, I mean, obviously yes, right? I'm not wearing a very fancy bald cap. I thought I'd bring it back, right? Low maintenance. I still have some hair to play around with, so had to bring back the bald Lucas. And as soon as I put on the muscle, then I'll look like a Vin Diesel Lucas. So
There we
something to
go.
look
There we
forward to.
go. Hey, there we go. That's fitness goals right there. Vin Diesel is fitness goals.
There we go. But it's the Vin Diesel, like the Fast and Furious guy that's fighting the Rock, right? Not the one on the
Yeah,
balcony with the belly. Like, we got to be specific because there's
yeah,
a
yeah,
certain one
yeah.
that's achievable and the other one's a little bit more difficult.
Yeah, you got to speak it. You law of attraction. You got to speak it into existence. So you got to be very specific about which Vin Diesel you want to be.
Yeah, it's like it's like I want to be Vin Diesel. Universe like, all right, man, like we can make it happen, dumbass. Like, no, we
Ex-
have to be
exactly.
specific. But speaking of changing up the body, though, you're posting some pics, right? You're sort of teasing us a little bit, but I'm seeing the comeback. I'm seeing the shape, the eating right. Like, looks like you're on a big journey yourself.
Yeah, no, it's been great. As I said before, once I crossed over the threshold of 30, I always told myself I'll start eating healthy then. But also even my most recent PFL loss, it's one of those things I really, if I want to get over that hump, I have to do the things that I wasn't doing. And that's one of those things was eating healthy. I've added a severe strength and conditioning program. As many times as I tell people I don't do strength and conditioning, I haven't done strength and conditioning religiously my whole professional MMA career. So, one big thing that I took back from my PFL experience was just how strong they felt to be able to hold me down, as well as just, taking care of my body. A lot of people, I think I played it off my poker face well in my most recent PFL fight. Most people don't know my shoulder came out of socket in the first 20 seconds of the fight. Um, I fought that whole fight with my shoulder out of socket, still dropped the guy in the third round with my opposite arm. But, it's one of those things I really have to start taking care of my body to alleviate these stupid injuries and big fights. So it's one of those things I'm just looking at putting everything together. I really think right now everything's firing on all cylinders, and even my body and pictures I'm posting, everybody can see it. So, I see a career after fighting. I might have to get into a little bit of male figure modeling nowadays.
Is it fair to say you're one of those guys that was skating by on athleticism? Like, there's a lot of guys like they sort of depend on it, and then something happens, they realize like I got to step it up a notch. Were you kind of one of those guys?
No, no, it was never athleticism. I think I've always been athletic. Technique. I would say I was floating by on technique. And what I mean by that is I do 6 hours in the gym. I do 3 hours of kickboxing training, I do 3 hours of wrestling. I do the cardio, but it's one of those things where I always had the potential and I'll always be at that point. But if I want to make that jump from being a prospect or, a tough middle ground professional fighter to being, the up and coming in the UFC, I have to do everything right. I think what's his name put it the best way. Jorge Masvidal, one of my favorite fighters before he blew up, because he's always been around. People like all the real MMA
Yeah.
fans know Jorge's always had, damn, that guy's tough. He'll lose a split decision. Damn, that guy's tough. And then most recent, like you said, he looked at his career, he reevaluated what he was doing wrong, and now you have the resurrection coming up, and that's kind of how I had to really look at it. I had to look, how am I getting these split decision losses? What am I not doing right in my fights? What is keeping me from getting over that hump? And, that's one of the mindset changes that I made, and one of those things that I'm just very excited for my next fight to show the changes in my mindset and just me as a whole fighter coming up.
You speak about Jorge Masvidal. That guy had kind of a weird, before. What was the big thing that made him blow up? I think Darren Till, right? Because that was kind of the one where he put himself on the map, and then Ben Askren kind of, it was like the extra. But I feel like before that, we were watching him in fights like the Larkin fight and the Ross Pearson fight. And the
Yeah.
big thing is everyone's like, he's not motivated. You know what I mean? He's
Mm-hmm.
going out there, he's fucking around, and then he's like, why am I losing a split decision when the whole time it was like, now you see some of that more of the potential, you know what I mean? And I feel like the motivation was always kind of what people were saying was his big issue. Like he didn't like his opponent enough to step up to that level.
So I would say, even getting at it, I wouldn't even say the motivation. I think some of it is just comfort. So like for myself, I like to relate it. in there, if you don't feel any danger, then you get in a little relaxed, like cruise control. Like
Right.
even like if I look at some of my fights, some of the split decisions I lost, messing around, like I don't feel any posed danger of me getting hurt. And you can see that in Mazadov, where this one he's like, fuck if, I'm coming to end you. You know what I mean? You saw that in Darren Till. You saw that in Ben Askren. I'm coming to fuck you up. And even in Nate Diaz, it wasn't a oh, this guy ain't gonna do shit to me. It was, I don't care what you're gonna do, I'm gonna fuck you up type of thing. And I
Right.
think that's the change of mindset. I wouldn't even put it as motivation. I think it's just one of those he was just too relaxed in there, and you have to put it to another level. It's almost like Connor a little bit, where I would say he's getting relaxed as opposed to, when Connor was coming up, he was hungry. Hungry for more, hungry for more, hungry for more. And you see a new resurgence of hunger with Jorge.
It makes me think of Kevin Holland went on Rogan's podcast with his coach Travis Luter, and I was listening to him, and Travis was saying like Kevin had that same thing where he was like, if you give him a shitty opponent, he's gonna fight shitty. He's gonna fight to that level, like because like you said, he doesn't feel the danger. That it's funny you mentioned that because that was something he said, and obviously I'm not a fighter, but when you do think of that, it's like mentally that would change things if you don't feel like you're in danger, if you don't feel like maybe that sense of urgency or something like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really weird, and that gets back to the whole mindset and certain things. For me, I always look back, in my career at least, it's like my past two opponents, they're both former World Series of Fighting champions. Andre Harrison and Alexander Almeida, I believe. They were both champions in World Series of Fighting. When they were champs, I was an amateur still, and I'm fighting them in the PFL for $1 million. And I still felt no danger. But what I get back to is that big thing of having to switch your mindset. Like for me, it's just like, I don't care who is across me going forward. I'm killing everyone, whether it's a guy who's 0-20 or a guy who's 20-0. I don't care. They're all getting killed. It's just that switch. That switch has to be done.
So what is it that gives you that sense of danger that you mentioned? Is it fighting a guy like, for example, in Anthony Johnson, where the second he touches you, you might be waking up in the back asking what happened? Because I feel like a lot of people they don't see quite the danger with the wrestlers aside from like Habib or
Yes.
something. But is that kind of what
Yeah.
it is?
Yeah, that's what it is. MMA is one of those sports where you can get jacked up real quick. And what I mean by you can get a flying knee like Jorge did on Ben Askren. You can, what happened last night? Kai Kara France, you know what I mean? Where he had the knockout and 10 seconds left.
Yeah.
Um, for me, I really focused on stand up. And what I mean by that, I still do stand up a bunch with real Muay Thai guys. I do boxing with real boxers. Like I've been in the ring with Jared Hurd, done a sparring session with Jared Hurd, who's pound for pound one of the top guys at 154 or 160 maybe right now. Muay Thai wise, I've trained with Kevin Ross, real Muay Thai guys that we have in house. My boy Ricardo Mixco, who's signed to Lion Fights. We're doing real stuff. And then when we transition to MMA, it's a shittier version of
Yeah.
real stand-up fights. So you don't feel that same danger that you would against real guys in these disciplines. And so, yeah, it does give you a little relaxed stature, but it's just about keeping that on light. And that's what I'm really working on. Is just treating everybody as, trying to take food off my plate. Or, I never really want to go through what I went through probably in the last year and a half, which is, injured reserve, really questioning if I still wanted to do MMA. Because, MMA is one of those, the highest of highs, the lowest of lows. And there's no better statement because, when you win, you're on top. When you lose, you fucking suck in everybody's eyes. Even your friends and your family start questioning you. So it's just one of those. So, it's just about understanding, enjoying the journey, and on to the next. Keeping that same hunger on each and every fight.
That's got to be crazy to have like your family member. I mean, your friends obviously their job is to roast the shit out of you no matter what. So you
Mm-hmm.
get your ass whooped, like you're gonna hear about it for a long time. But I feel like if your family is starting to doubt your fighting a little bit, and that's when it's kind of like, hold up, you guys. Even if I got knocked out 17 times in a row, you guys should think that I'm gonna be UFC world champion, even though it ain't happening. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like that's
no,
crazy.
I do believe like with your family, they have to. A lot of times they have to keep the raw truth, and they got to look at you from what you can't see. They always
Right.
just want you to be happy. So like I've been blessed enough to never have been knocked out in my career, whether it was Muay Thai or MMA, any of those amateur fights. Never been finished, other than maybe a stoppage where my ankle popped out and the ref had to stop it. But outside of that, I do believe if you have a guy who's getting knocked out every fight, at some point the family has to step in, like, look, man, I can't have you do, because you
Yeah.
never want to see anyone have CT in the future. But also, outside of that, yeah, I do agree. You do need your family support. They're in a tough position. I personally, for me, my fights, when I fight, I don't really, you get a little bit of nerves, but I don't really get as much nerves as when I watch my teammates like Teflon fight or Sadiq. I'm like on the edge, like, like, a
Yeah.
little scared. And so, like, if that's me watching my teammates, I can only imagine your family watching when they're like, what the hell's going on? I don't even know what's going on. Is he winning?
Yeah,
That type of
right.
thing. So,
I imagine they can't even enjoy it, right? Because the whole time, every time you get hit, it's like it's like,
yeah,
you have
exactly.
to trust that I know what I'm doing out there, but at the same time, it's your family, like, every time you get punched in the face, it's like they gotta freak out a little bit.
Exactly. Exactly.
You mentioned that, the MMA stand-up is, a little bit shittier than some of the Muay Thai and stuff, I mean, which makes sense with all the different aspects of the striking that you add in when you put in everything, but what's kind of the biggest thing you notice? Like, it sounds like a lot of boxers, they say head movement is, like, the biggest one where they're like, "None of these guys have good head movement." I mean, what's kinda, like, the biggest thing that makes the MMA striking not as good as, like, pure Muay Thai or something like that?
The biggest thing about MMA, I think, is there's just so many things you have to account for. So, whether time is of the essence. So, depending on when a guy starts, what background they're coming from, their age, where they started, you have to really take in all that into account. For example, if you take someone like Henry Cejudo, who was wrestling his whole life, when he comes in the gym, you don't have to teach him wrestling. You can put everything in stand up, and if you look at it, Henry Cejudo has pretty clean Muay Thai, and then he has Olympic wrestling, so you don't really have to train that as much. But I really believe what makes MMA stand up a little hard is you got these guys who train very little boxing or very little Muay Thai, and then they go in there and they're throwing stuff without the understanding of everything. In order to really understand, you have to immerse yourself with a real boxing coach. Like right now, we have a WBC, two-time WBC boxing coach at our gym. Muay Thai, we have a lineage where his coach was fighting in Thailand with the Thais. And then jiu-jitsu, being under Master Lloyd, he has one of the best jiu-jitsu, lineages in the game. But right now, you just have a lot of, with the explosion of the UFC, you have a lot of MMA gyms blowing up without the proper coaching staff, and a lot of guys training. And now, like they say, it's easy to get to the UFC, it's hard to stay in. And a lot of it is, once you get in there, you can get a short notice, and you get in there until you're fighting like a killer, like Khabib's teammate or something, where you get exposed and you're shown that you're really not that good. But getting back to the question, the biggest thing I think is people aren't just focusing on pure stand up, but all kicks aren't the same. I mean, I know if I hit you with my left kick, you're gonna feel it because I trained that with real Muay Thai guys. I know my right hook. I know I've had boxers say, "Hey, you got a good right hook," so I'm confident in that. A lot of guys, they're just throwing these crappy strikes, and then nobody's ever made them pay. And the first time you want to pay is not in an MMA fight. You want to make it, get paid for in sparring. All right, maybe I won't throw my punch like that anymore. Little things. So I do think it's just about finding the proper coaching staff and immersing yourself to always having that white belt mentality, that beginner mentality, being able to find the guys who mastered it in that discipline and ask them how to properly do it, train under them. And it's just, you have to humble yourself in this sport if you really want. And I think that's one of the things MMA fighters have a hard part of doing is, if you look at the greats like GSP, if you ever listen to him, when back, I remember watching the UFC Unleashed when he would go to Henzo's to do his jiu-jitsu. He would bring in a guy straight from Thailand for his Muay Thai. And I always loved that. And even now, the older I get, you understand it more. If you look at the greats from anywhere, even John Jones, John Jones, has that background where he's always bringing in people to get better at where he's lacking. So yeah.
We talk about striking, and I guess there's this new technique that Dustin Poirier and his team invented, right? Just that's never existed before. No one's ever heard about it. But what is it? The calf kick, right? All of a sudden, people are talking about this calf kick. Like, I thought the Paul Felder James Vick fight was going to be the one where people are finally going to realize, right? And then they
Gosh.
forgot about it. But I guess you got to use them on a guy like Connor to get people to finally understand, like, oh, you can do a move like that.
No, I mean, it's funny because I'm gonna give my boy a little plug. Shout out to Sadiq. If you go back, I think it was 2017. People are not even giving my man Sadiq Youssef credit for his contender fight where he chopped down Mike Davis with that same calf kick. Um, if you rewatch it, Mike Davis was limping in that
Yeah,
second round, arguably probably one of the most competitive contender fights out there. It wasn't one sided. They were scrapping. That
yeah,
would have been UFC. We always joke if that was on a UFC main card,
it's bonus.
they would have both got 50K that
Yeah,
night. But yeah, no, the calf kick is one of those things. It does suck. Don't get me wrong. There are a bunch of other kicks. My Muay Thai coach always says you just need to learn how to properly set it up and how to properly throw a kick. Most MMA guys don't know how to properly throw a kick or how to properly set up a kick. Even if you get back to old school Jose Aldo, where he's chopping those guys down. You know why he's chopping those guys down? Because nobody knew how to check a kick. And then once they learned how to chop, then it was like it kind of stopped for a while. So it's one of those things where eventually people are going to realize, oh, maybe if I teep this guy with my opposite leg when he's throwing a kick, he wouldn't have the opportunity to throw a calf kick. Or if I check it, or if I stop standing so much weight on my front leg, he wouldn't be able to catch. So yeah, it's
yeah,
when
exactly.
you know, you know. If you don't know what you don't know, that's the thing. And we're showing that MMA guys do not know, as I told you, pure skill. It's like back in Henzo days, or Hoist when he came into UFC and was submitting everyone. Everyone was, "What's this black magic?" And he's
Exactly.
just doing like a triangle and an armbar.
Oh man, it's funny you mentioned the Sadiq and Mike fight because we're talking about striking, but Mike can box. Like that dude, like I believe it was the Thomas Gifford fight where he fucked that dude up, and we found out he had some levels. And obviously for Sadiq to get a win over a guy like that, and now that we see how high level his striking is, I mean it's a damn impressive victory, and especially now that we look back on it.
Yeah, yeah, man. I mean, I'd say he had possibly arguably the hardest road into the UFC. To have that on your contender, and then you see these. I don't want to hate on, and then you see these contender fights now, and you're like, man, this is just like they're trying to get him in.
Yeah,
It's
yeah.
almost not even competitive sometimes. But like, yeah, I'd say Sadiq had him and Mike Davis both. Even Mike losing that fight that night should have got a contract because that was like just an impressive 3-round war, to this day. And I think it's still, hopefully, they start playing a little bit more with this up and coming fight just to replay it because that was like a great fight to watch from an MMA standpoint and an MMA fan standpoint, just how they went back and forth, back and forth.
But you do have a good point. It does feel like the Contender Series, it's not quite what it once was those first couple of seasons, right? It did feel like, hey, if you're not knocking this dude out in impressive fashion, like you're not getting a contract. Like we don't want to see any of that. And now today we're seeing more and more guys where it's kind of like, listen, win and we're going to give you a contract no matter what.
Yeah.
And it has changed. And I mean, you've competed on the show, so obviously you know a little bit more about it, but it's like it does feel like there is a change. Even the guys coming in, it feels like it's different from those like first two seasons.
Yeah, no, I know my season it was like win. Not only do you have to win impressively.
Right.
So, you're going out there kind of auditioning, like, hope boss picks me. But now it's kind of like at this point, if you win, you're almost in. But also you got to look with the climate and the time change. You know, especially this past one because you got COVID. I imagine, UFC, they have to meet a certain amount of numbers in regards to shows. So just having those fighters that are ready and hungry to sign, it's a business. So, you get, for me, I can tell you, if I sign to the UFC tomorrow, I'm trying to fight 3 times in the next 3 months, as opposed to somebody who has been in there and, they're making 120, these guys coming straight off the contender. Why would I pay, if you think about it, Alistair who just got cut, 400,000 for Alistair when I could pay for 30 contender fights and they're making 10,000. I'm gonna,
Exactly.
You know what I mean? I can pump them on cards. And Alistair's just one guy, and his name isn't even that big. I don't want to say he's big to us MMA
Yeah,
fans,
right,
but
right.
to the average, he's not a Connor, he's not a Jorge
Yeah.
now, he's not a John Jones or anything pay per view wise. So it's like, from a business standpoint, I can see why it's like that.
Well, that's the reason a bunch of people turned on the Contender Series. Like at first, because especially the media, as someone that's in it, like we love prospects, right? And there's some dudes like a Nolan King and a bunch of other guys where prospects are their thing, and they're really good at making sure your name's out there. And so when the Contender Series came along, everybody's like, "Yes, let's give these guys their shine and stuff." And then it kind of turned into, "Hey, if you're expensive and you're not necessarily a title contender, or you're that close to it, boom, you're gone." Like a JDS, like an Overeem, like you mentioned, and now
Yeah.
feels like people are turning on the show because it's like, hold on, you're trying to bring on these cheap guys to replace all the big names. And it's like, yeah, business wise, you can't argue with it. But from a fan perspective, it definitely sucks seeing stuff like that.
Oh yeah, no, I mean, I would love, even hopefully UFC doesn't steal my idea and doesn't give me credit, but I would love something like a Survivor type of thing. If they like release a list, like I think this would be pretty fucking dope. They're like, look, you're getting cut. So you go and you're on UFC Survivor and you have to fight a prospect.
Yeah.
If you win, you get to stay. If you lose, you're out and the prospects in. I think that's a pretty dope ass concept. You know, where the vet he gets one last shot and he gets the hungry up and comer. The hungry up and comer is gonna make what he makes. The vet is gonna make what he makes, but it gives this guy one last shot and it gives this prospect a shot to say, yo, I'm here now. That type of thing. I think it would be like a good platform to introduce whether the vet wins, who's kind of you don't know, or whether the prospect goes in. You have a little storyline. Well, he beat, like if you take one of the heavyweight prospect, well, he beat Alistair Overeem to take his job. You know that I think that's pretty dope.
It's a good idea, but that I mean that's a tough concept too, right? Like imagine you have a guy like Overeem who, the thing with him was always like he's this tremendous striker, tremendous wrestler, but that chin's always been suspect. Like, and I see people argue about it. It's like it's not an argument. He's just good enough that he's able to sort of navigate it. But
Hmm.
he's good enough that if you can't knock him out, if you don't have that power, he's gonna weather that storm and he's gonna beat you. So that's a tough concept for both guys because you're gonna have some dudes on there that can fuck you up if you don't put them to
No,
sleep. And
and that's the thing. That's why I
survival
said
of the
it'd be
fittest.
fucking
Yeah.
good show. Dana White, hire me. I'll be your matchmaker. That would be pretty dope.
I see. You're trying to be matchmaker. You need to try to be on the show. That's what I feel like.
Oh
You need
yeah,
to be
no, no.
taking out some of these veterans.
Hey, if you got anyone who's willing to sign this contract, let me know. But
You,
we're
you,
we're sitting here hoping.
yeah, you teased your training partners a little bit, but just the two African guys you mentioned, right? Like I don't know. I'm hearing more and more people like I don't know what's going on in Africa, but they got some freaks out there, man. And just Tayfon Chukwi and Sadiq Yusuf, like those two are on a very fun path. They're winning all these fights. Like these guys are very exciting, and they're a big reason why people are pushing this UFC Africa, which I still think it's not specific enough. Like, it's a big
Yeah,
ass
you do
continent. Like,
realize there's a bunch of countries in Africa.
yes, and then they'll tell you like, all right, UFC Nigeria, all right, where? Like,
Yeah,
there's cities and places, like, where in Nigeria? You know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
it's but
exactly.
I like where people's heads are at. They're not in a bad spot, but it's like, come on, a little bit of geography, just a little minimum.
I was a history major, so I can respect that as well.
There we go. I was having an argument with a guy at work where we were trying to name some fun countries, and we got to Africa, and I was like, Djibouti. He's like, "There's no way that's true." I was like, "Oh, I'm telling you," because in seventh grade we found out about this country, and that's all we could talk about was this great name. And it's this thing where you debate about it, and then you look it up, and it's like, man, it's like you're right about
Exactly.
Djibouti. It's like, yeah, I can't make that thing up.
Yep, yep. That's hilarious. I mean, it's one of those I'm still learning about. I would say the human thing that we don't realize, I think, for me is I'm 30 and I'm still learning shit every day. I hate people who think they know everything because you don't have enough time to know everything in the world.
Yeah,
So yeah, no, when you get back at that, like there are so many things we just don't know about with geography, countries. A lot of people, it gets back to oh, Russian,
yeah,
Khabib and his Russian, you're like, where are they from? Are they Dagestani? It's that type
yes.
of thing.
Oh man, when you start getting into Russia though, and you start looking at stuff like Chechnya and stuff like that, like Russia, man, they got some stuff going on out there. Even you hear like Hamzat Shemaev is like, "I'm retiring," and then you got this dictator comes out, it's like, "No, you're not." It's
Exactly.
getting real crazy.
Yeah, people forget like that shit is government funded. I have a private. I do privates with one of these kids, and he's getting pretty good. He's like 17 years old. He has a knack for MMA. He really enjoys it. And he always wants to like mess around and spar his dad. I'm like, we're not planning for you. We're not game planning for you to fight your dad. We're game planning for that little Russian kid who knows nothing but MMA and has been on government sponsored checks. So he eat, breathes, and sleeps wrestling, striking, and then he's trying to make his UFC debut at 21. That's the guy we're gunning for.
Exactly. Like as soon as you see the guy with, the haircut I currently have and an Abraham Lincoln beard, like you already know what the game plan is going into that one. It's he's gonna take you down and he's gonna wait. I mean, just like we saw last night against Drew Dober, like those are the kind of guys you have to watch out for. And especially you were in PFL. We're seeing PFL signing all those Gamedovs and
Yeah.
all those guys. Like, we're seeing them slowly start to take over a little bit.
Yeah, and it's a lot of them you can't hate. They just have a system. I was just talking about it earlier. A lot of people want to hate on Islam, that game, him and Khabib, but there's something to be said about a system. If you put your hand there, I'm doing this. If you
Yeah.
put your hand there, I'm doing this. If you move your arm this way, arm bar. Like it's a flawless system that they perfected, and if you can't beat it, then they're gonna ride that wave to the championship.
Well, exactly. Like people are criticizing him. It's like, okay, stop him. You know what I mean? Like, don't. Yeah, and it sounds stupid when you say it like that. Like, don't let him take you down. Go ahead and knock him out. But it's like that.
Yes.
Like, if you want them to not do that, have somebody go out there and stop them. And there's a reason nobody's been able to do that yet.
Exactly. Exactly.
Well, one person I did want to talk to you about, but I believe James Vick trains with you guys. What's kind of the update on him? Because I know he lost his last fight on the regional scene. He announced his retirement. What's kind of the update on James?
I know James, he trains with us. He usually comes down from Texas for his camps. Unfortunately, this one he did not come down. So he did his whole camp in Texas. I know right now, last I heard, he is retired. He went against, every fighter never wants to hang up the gloves, but I think when it came down to his wife and he has a kid that he's
Yeah.
always posting. It's one of those things. How many you hate to see somebody get knocked out that many times in a row and nobody say anything. From the
Yeah.
bottom of my heart, Master Lloyd I know said something. All the coaching staff had said something, but I think this one was the big drawing straw. That it was unfortunately a little vicious. I think he suffered a little bit of a minor broken jaw or so, but it's just one of those things. This sport you do not get paid enough to take the damage that he was taking.
Yeah.
And what I mean by that is, at least in the NBA, when you sign to an NBA team, your minimum is 400,000. When you sign to the UFC, your minimum is 10,000, 10 and
Right.
10.
Yeah.
And you're lucky if you win that, and then your coaches touch it, then taxes touch it, and everything else that comes with the sport. So for James, as far as I know, he is retired. We're in a group chat. We're joking. He seems in good spirits. He's hunting. That's my little Texas Lone Ranger. But outside of that, yeah, he seems in good spirits. I know at this point, he is retired. The jersey is in the rafters at this point.
That was a sad one for me because I feel like James Vick, like he was one of those guys. Like at one point, people were talking about, what's this guy's potential? What's he going to do in the UFC? And then it kind of just went downhill so fast. And I feel like the Justin Gaethje fight is really the one that sort of got everything going downhill. And I feel like it happened so fast. Like before you know it, he was out of the UFC, and then he was just like, I'm retired. And I remember just thinking, like, that just shows you how harsh this game is. Like one
Yeah.
moment people are talking about your potential, and then next thing you know, you're retiring and moving on to something else. That to me was a tough one to watch.
Yeah, no, I mean, I don't get me wrong. James Vick is one of those guys where, when I was amateur coming up, he just started doing his training camp up here at Lloyd's, and then trained with them until probably up until about my 14th or 13th. I'm trying to see where I was professional wise with my career, but seeing him go on that 7 fight win streak, he's one of the most inspirational guys. And what I mean by that is just hearing him talk. I remember he would tell me and Sadiq, man, you guys will beat all these guys at 145. Like when you guys go pro, like, man, you guys will kill these guys. And the big thing is like, he is a hard worker. I think he gets a lot of bad rep because he's so outspoken. But I always
Yeah.
tell people, I love the outspoken people. If you're just who you are, and to a T, that's just who you are. Outside of that, if you have a chat with him, he's cool as shit. He's down to earth. MMA, Twitter will go and make all the memes. But we have a joke where, when you made the Gaethje thing, you gotta live with it at that point. So if he would have went out there, and a lot of people don't realize he hurt Gaethje with a body kick. If he would have stopped Gaethje with that, that's a whole different projection. Then he's good. But the fact that he went out there and then got caught by Gaethje, MMA Twitter is gonna make you feel it. I haven't even really looked into the UFC fight Twitter stuff. But I imagine they're probably making Izzy feel it about the John Jones talk after taking a L to Jan. But you got to live with your words, And I think the bad thing about MMA is I like to say we have the worst fans ever. Like,
Yeah,
at
yeah,
least in football, you got your ride or die fans. If your team suck, you like, hey, my team suck, but that's my
right,
team. If
right.
you're in basketball, but MMA, man,
Oh
you
man.
barely get those ride or die unless it's like a Connor or like the big names, everybody, or they know you. Outside of that, once you start losing, hey, they like, hey, fuck that guy, he sucks. Like, and the one guy who's just rooting for you starts rooting for the other guy. You're like,
Yes.
oh, so it's a harsh sport. It is, honestly.
It is crazy because it's like, I think the fact that fighters are so accessible, you know what I mean? Like you can just send a
Yeah.
guy a message and you hop on the podcast. Like the fact that you guys are so accessible means that any dumbass can hit you up and tell you suck because you lost your last fight. And it's like, as much people say, oh, I don't read it, I don't pay attention to it. There is that part of you that's kind of curious, right? Like, what does this say? And then you look at it and you might feel like shit because some loser
Yeah.
told you sucked. But it's like you guys are so accessible that it's like tons of stuff are going to get through. While football players, for example, like they're not going to see half this shit just because their whole social media is blowing up constantly.
Yeah, my man. One thing I always try and tell myself, and I live my life this way, is fuck everybody's opinion, man.
Right.
I'm as long as I'm happy, that's all that matters. My family, my friends, as long as I can make my coach and staff happy and do them proud, then I don't have no complaints. One thing that I've always set out in my career, and one thing that I did when I was 18, I never conceded to my goals. I said I was going to be a professional MMA fighter at 18. I remember saying that as a 16-year-old in high school, and people laughing at me because my voice was high pitched. And I was a little, I didn't look like the fighter type. I'd never gotten in a fight other than middle school when I had to punch a bully. Actually, he's not even a bully, but he was bullying me, calling me Peter Griffin. I was a little chunky at the time, so I couldn't let him get away with that. But that
Yeah.
was my only fight in school. So, like, for me, you get a 16-year-old who's down to earth, chill, saying, I'm going to be in the UFC. I'm going to be a professional MMA fighter. It's one of those things where I firmly believe 97% of the world, we all come up with goals and dreams, but it's only 3% of people that actually chase those dreams and stick to the script through the ups and the downs and the twists and the turns, who really stay to it and follow through on their goals, and it's a tough percentage. And all the people who typically go to these pages and leave hate mail or hate messages, they're just showing a reflection of themselves. I personally never reach out to any human and intentionally look to hurt their feelings. Like, you really have to be miserable to really be on someone's page and say, hey, you suck, hey, this, and type these shit, just the stuff that you see. It's like, man, you really need to look in the mirror and smile a little bit. Well, I feel bad for you a little bit, but that's life, unfortunately.
That's the crazy thing, right? Like you think like I guess if you're a healthy individual, you don't think like, oh, Israel just lost, so let me get in his DMs and tell him he sucks because he lost to the Polish power. You know what I mean? Like it feels like a very weird thing to do, like to hit up somebody and just like get on them about something that you have no idea about because you're never gonna do some shit like that.
Yeah, no, it's the problem with the human nature. We all want to criticize instead of looking at ourselves in the mirror and really just understanding that no matter who is at the top, whether it's Tom Brady, whether it's Israel, whether it's John Jones, we're all human. We all feel something. So at the end of the day, what comes around goes around, and I feel bad for all those people who go out of their way to leave hateful messages because, like I said, at that point, I wonder how bad your life is that you feel that's on your to-do list. Reminder. Let me go tell Israel how shitty he was last night. Okay, done. Like, come on now.
It's crazy because the big thing is that like if somebody told you sucked in your DMs, but they saw you in real life, Peter, let me get a picture, my man, like all that stuff, like
Exactly.
keep that same energy, right? Like what happened? I thought you said I sucked.
Exactly. And it's funny because half the time most of them are weirdos in real life. We have
Yeah.
this little joke. There was a troll at the gym. I'm not going to say any names, but there's a troll at the gym who we know would get on people's comments and talk crap. But if you meet him in person, he's weird as shit. And I'm like, but we just never have met a troll in person before. But he's changed his tone. He hasn't really trolled people as much. I think because he started training, he understands now the what it takes to get in there. But yeah, it's always funny like that.
But isn't it weird to be trolling someone that should easily be able to kick your ass without overthinking it at all? Like to think like if you were to just get you one good time in the face, like you're completely out of it. Like it seems like a dangerous game, right? Poking the bear, something like that.
No, because the thing is, behind the keyboard, they'll never really ever have to face any answers. Now, if we were able to do like a little game show where you can get the location of all these trolls and knock on their door and say, "Hey, what's up? Are you troll 1, 2, 3, 4?" Like, and then just punch them in the face, and that'll be perfect. But that will never happen.
I always like to talk about fighters with their sort of, sometimes you have civilians, right? I guess that's what we can call them that come up to you and that try to fight you because you're a professional fighter and they think they have hands. Have you had a situation like that? You had to put the paws on like a regular dude and sort of feel the difference between a fighter and a regular guy?
No, I never. I'm so like down to earth and chill. Like I've never had in person problems. There was one. I don't even want to say comment or something that rubbed me wrong, but it was at one of my fights in Baltimore, one of my regional fights. One of my friends who I work with, her boyfriend was like, "Man, I think I can get Peter with the hands." And it was because like I think I didn't use my hand or my jab as much, or I was kicking a lot and maybe wrestling. And keep in mind, this guy smokes every day, drinks every. So like when I evaluated it in my head, I took it a little bit deeper. Like this motherfucker just watched the fight, and knowing his lifestyle and knowing my lifestyle, still thinks he can beat me with like boxing. But you got to take it to a point where, at that point, that's when you just invite him to work out. And in
Yeah.
the first minute, they'll be gassed, hands on their knees. And a lot of people, if you've never been in that situation, you don't know what it takes to get in there as a trained, let alone an amateur. You don't know what it's like to get in there as a trained professional against another trained professional. Who knows what you're trying to do? You know what they're trying to do. It's different in that realm. Same thing. I always mess around with people who talk shit to LeBron. Oh man, he's such a pussy. LeBron's 6 foot whatever and 250 pounds. Like, if LeBron is right here, you would not be saying that as you look up at him.
Hell no. Yeah,
It's that type of thing, man.
yeah, exactly. No, it's crazy. Even LeBron, like like you said, he's like 6'9". Like he could fight at heavyweight easily. Like this guy's gigantic. Like you're gonna tell that physical freak. Like, but man, speaking of LeBron though, there was something that I was talking to someone about recently where they were telling me about his hair. Like I feel like everyone's gotten to this point with LeBron where everyone's going off on his hair. Like, can we start a movement like LeBron join me in shaving your head? You know what I mean? Like, is it time?
I don't think we're going to get that until about, I mean, he's what, 36 now?
Yeah.
Still looking as good as ever. I don't think we're getting that until he retires at maybe 45. No, he'll probably retire at like 40 or so. But no, I don't think we're going to get it, unfortunately. You got a lot of that millions that he has over there is going to some hair transplants. So,
Man, but it's not working. Like for a long time, it was working. Like his hairline, people were like, "What the fuck?" And then he got to a point now where it's like it's weird. Like you can see what's going on, and that for me, that's the point where it's like I can understand. Like an Elon Musk. He did everything he could to keep
mhm.
it. Joe Rogan tried it, didn't work. Like I get it. You know what I mean? Hair's a big deal, but you do reach a point where it's like, look, man, and he
Time
shaved
to
his
let
head
it go.
exactly. But and especially if you look good bald, it's like, what are you waiting for, man? Like LeBron shaved it once, how crazy the internet went. It's like you look good, man. Just give it up. Join the goats, right? The Kobe's, the Jordans, all those guys. Like you have
Yeah,
to be
boy.
bald.
He might do it. I think maybe when you say it like that, he might do it his final season. So that just says he's not retiring this year.
Right.
Maybe like his last season, where maybe he gets Bronny on his team. He's like, now it's time to shave my head. We're gonna do this.
That's the crazy thing, right? The talk of him and Bronny playing together. Like, how insane is that? Like, you imagine LeBron on crutches trying to hobble up and down the court while he's got his son with him. That would be such a crazy storyline.
Man, I was telling same thing I was saying about my kid who I do a privates with. him and his dad, they're like LeBron haters a little bit. So I always
Yeah.
like to put in perspective, like, do you realize when I was in middle school, there was talks of LeBron in high school being the next best. And not only did he live up to that, he is now in the conversation. We're not arguing over whether he'll get a ring. We're arguing over whether he'll get more than MJ. You get what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like at that point, do you understand the timeline that it even the discipline that it took from him being that prospect to even going to be in the talks of the greats, and we're arguing about him being better than Michael Jordan? Like there has to be some appreciation, but it's one of those things we're not going to appreciate him until he retires. Same with Kobe. I was
Yeah.
probably a big Kobe hater until he retired, honestly, because I was a Mavericks fan type of
Yeah.
thing. And same thing with Tom Brady. I think people are now starting to like him more because he went to the Buccaneers. But a lot of these guys, we're getting these guys who are going to be our generation where we're old heads and we're telling our kids, grandkids, like, I
Yeah.
remember when Tom Brady, and they're like, shut up, granddad, that type of thing. Uh,
The funny thing is, we watched the Last Dance, right? I believe that was May or summer, whenever that came out, and we're all appreciating Jordan's greatness. And it's like we have the equivalent of that. Like there's Magic. There's every generation has their like LeBron's our guy. Love him or hate him, you have to appreciate the greatness a little bit. Like knowing that you have this generational athlete, and it's happening right now. Like you talk about being an old head and all that stuff. Like you're gonna be able to tell your grandkids, like, yeah, I watched LeBron and watched them drag the shittiest Cavs teams twice to the
yeah.
finals, and you know what I mean? Like you don't have to like him, but you can appreciate the greatness and the legacy that he's leaving out there.
Yeah, exactly. It's once they do like the in depth of LeBron's story from high school to him transitioning to the league to him in that middle and going to Miami, and then coming back and bringing and then going to LA. It's gonna be that series is gonna be good, but it's one of those things where we really aren't going to appreciate him until once he retires, and I look forward to it. I am a huge LeBron fan. I'm a huge fan of anybody that just sticks to it and really just goes out the grind and let alone gets it done. Dating back to our boy Jan from last night, I always say, how can you hate on someone like Jan? Jan who's been through the grind of losing some fights, being 2-4 on the verge of getting cut, to then going on a mean streak, knocking out Luke Rockhold, and then last night beats undefeated prospect who people are saying could go down as the GOAT and Izzy.
Yeah.
And you can almost argue and say he did it pretty dominant if you rewatch the fight. He didn't fight on anything, and I made a lot of money on Jan last night, so I'm very excited. But yeah,
It was crazy. I was watching the Blachowicz and Adesanya fight, and I'm like, how crazy is it that this guy that I was watching get out wrestled by Corey Anderson all those years ago, this is the dude that's the new champion that John Jones has gone and beating a dude like Adesanya. Like I would have never guessed in a million years that would have been the guy that we'd be talking about.
yeah, and it gets back to one of the things I've really been preaching and just changing my mindset too. Rest in peace to Nipsey Hussle as the marathon man. If there's anything I have to relate to MMA, we talk about this a lot. I say this to Sadiq, MMA is a marathon, and if you look at it, as long as you stick to it, you're always going to get somewhere in it. And a lot of the MMA fighters, Tyson Nam, if you look, I think he finally got signed at 34. You look at the late resurgence by Jan. I didn't even realize until they put up his age last night. Jan's 38, and I'm like, damn, just it's a marathon. This game is just about keep going, keep doing the hard work when nobody really. Nobody's talking about you. Nobody's really looking into you. If as long as you just stick to the grind, it's gonna pay off, man. It's just about that, the marathon, man.
It's funny you mentioned that because I know a lot of fighters hate the media, but when you say stuff like that, it's like as a member of the media that's still trying to grow and stuff, like we've heard that exact sentence, that exact thing a million times. Like keep at it, keep going, make content, keep working on stuff. And it's very similar to fighters as well, where it's like keep fighting, keep training, all that stuff. And it's just crazy. Like all of it is just keep at it. Like even if everybody thinks you suck now, like if you keep working, eventually you're gonna get to a point where people are gonna start recognizing you.
Man, you never know. I read a lot about me, I have a good, decent job outside of here, luckily. But before I got it, I was struggling, sticking in the grind. I graduated college and I stayed in the restaurant industry, as a server, just working weekends, barely scraping by, just so I can have my weeks free so I can train 2 times a day and not have to work. But I stuck to that grind until I found a job and a career that is accessible to fighting, and I get to do best of both worlds and more financially free. You see the Nike stuff, this
Yeah.
ain't cheap, but where I can financially be okay and still train full time. But a lot of people, I didn't get my job. I graduated college at 21. I didn't get my job that I felt would fulfill or give me the potential to keep training in MMA until I was 28. And not too many people. Too many people. My coach has this saying, it's a noose. They tie this noose around their neck, and what we compare that to is responsibilities. Meaning MMA, you have so much stressors where you have to train. So if you have kids, that noose is getting tighter. If you have money issues, that noose is getting tighter. If you have any type of responsibility that takes you out of the gym, that type of thing, where eventually you just have to jump off and you kill yourself, you kill your career, and the biggest thing that you can do as an MMA fighter is not eliminate your stressors outside of the gym. I think a lot of fans don't realize these guys are not NBA players, NFL players, where they don't have to go to work. They don't have to. They don't leave the gym. We leave the gym, and it's very rare that an MMA fighter doesn't have a second job, a third job, two jobs. I think what is it? Buckley is working as a manager at CVS, and they were
Walgreens.
asking.
Yeah, I think
You
it's
Walgreens,
Walgreens.
there you
Yeah.
go. And they were asking, "Hey, you gonna leave your job?" And I was like, "No, I ain't
I
leaving my
can't.
job." Because, like you said, with the James Victim, this thing could be over. You go on a 2 fight losing streak, here's your cut papers, and now you're making $0 a year, and your fight. People don't realize the drop off to the regional. It's not like when you go regional, you're making two. You're making like $500 to fight this killer. You're making
Yeah.
$300 to fight that guy. Yeah, that ain't paying nothing. So
Yeah, that's why I read an article on the Athletic that was sort of breaking down the fighter pay. They did this huge study, and I thought it was super interesting. But when you see all the shit that gets taken out of your paycheck, like just the tax, or fighting internationally, you get all these taxes taken away. You fight in China or something, it's crazy. You're paying
mhm.
your coaches, you're paying all this extra stuff, and then you look at it, and it's like, hold on, like how many times a year do you have to fight to do this full time? Like even if you make a ton of money, you're losing half of that. So it's crazy when you look at the guys in the prelims that are making, like you mentioned, 10K, 10K, like so much of that is gone because you have to pay all these people, which, things like your coaches and stuff, it's normal, but still it's like, it's crazy that you lose all of this money.
Yeah, I mean, it's one of those things you really gotta love this sport to, make it at a high level. I would like to relate it back to Teflon. I remember Teflon mentioned something. I want to say it was like 3 years ago. He was like, "Man, I'm ready to go pro." And I was like, "For what?" I remember because I was like, even when you go pro, because he wasn't able to find fights, and he's like, "Man, I'm ready to go pro." And it's time to get paid. And I was like, "Bro, you're gonna go pro, and you're still gonna be broke. You might as well
Yeah.
just get a few more fights for experience." And it's one of those things. You think it's one way, as an amateur, or even as you progress, and you realize it's not even that. I remember one person told me, "Hey, how'd you get like a local show in Baltimore? They usually have a pretty packed crowd. I think they do like 5 to 10,000 people. They close off half the Royal Farms Arena, so it seems like a bigger venue. So they're in the fans in there thinking we making like thousands of dollars, and it's like, dang, how much you make for that? For like 10,000? Like, man, I made 500. Like nah, man. Like they think it's one way, but it's not at all. And I had another one where 3 or 4 years ago, I remember one of my boys. This is when I was like 3-0, 4-0 as a professional, and I pulled up in my beat ass 2014 Nissan Versa. That it sounded like clinky. He was like, "Oh, damn, I thought you'd drive something better than that." I was like, "Shut up!" Like they think we
Yeah.
sign these NFL deals, the average fans, and it's nowhere near like that at all.
Exactly. One thing I like to talk to fighters about on the show is sort of their relationship with the media, because I feel like everyone, like fighters, don't necessarily like the media. Sometimes the media can do things that are a little bit strange and stuff like that. Where do you stand with the media? Like, are you enjoying doing the interviews, doing all that stuff, or are you one of those guys like if you could only focus on the fight, that would be your case?
I don't mind. When you reached out, I was like, yeah, sure, why not? As
Yeah.
long as we just have to find the perfect time. But for me, I don't really mind. I wouldn't say I hate the media. The one thing I will say, it's just very fair weather. No offense or anything, but it's a very fair weather industry. I mean, if a guy wins, everybody wants to talk to the winner. Nobody wants to talk to the loser. I don't really like that type of thing, just because in MMA there's so many different aspects. From we have a chat with Izzy, wondering where his mind's. Well, it's different because he was the main event. But even if we go back to Aljamain Peter Yan, yeah, I think a good one would be, talking to Peter Yan, like, well, what do you think about that? What was going through your mind? This during me, little things, getting two sides to every story. Because there's your people who are gonna flat out say, "Oh, that shit was intentional," or there are people that are gonna say, "Well, maybe he was already in the act of throwing it," and that thing. Just getting a clear view of that. Or if you look at Aljamain, you have your people saying, "Man, he sold that," or you have your people who are saying, "Man, he was losing the fight. No, he was winning." I personally think, in the Aljamain Sterling thing, I'm like, hey, you said you better sell that thing. Hey, you got a UFC
Yeah.
championship on the line. You just ate a legal knee. You might have been losing. Sell the shit. You get an
Yeah.
Oscar.
Keep
I
the
don't
money.
care. Yeah, but it's one of those things where I think the media is a very hard thing, because even media wise, as I said, it's one thing to be a fan of the sport. It's one thing to cover the sport, but I also think some of the media is not really trained in understanding the aspects of the sport, whether, understanding the physical demands, the practice demands, the financial demands, the mental demands of MMA. I do think, with it being still relatively a new sport, that some of the MMA media behind it don't really understand what goes into a real training camp and everything.
For sure, I can that really frustrates me about the media. It's like, take a case like you mentioned Buckley, right? Where before his fight, I don't think we saw him do any media or stuff like that. Or he had a few guys like that were always good about talking to him. All of a sudden, he gets his highlight reel knockout. Now he's every outlet you can think of. He's doing all these interviews, and it can be frustrating because you look at it and it's like it shouldn't be like that. You should still be doing media, but the same amount and stuff like that. It can be frustrating when you see everyone like jump on a bandwagon like that, and in reality, you have some dudes that were busting their ass talking to him, from the regional scene up until he got the highlight reel knockout. But that's definitely something that kind of frustrates me. This whole when you blow up, that's when everybody wants to talk to you. But when you're still grinding and you need to get your name out there, that's where it gets a little bit tougher to book some of these interviews.
Yeah. Yeah, well, yeah. So, I think you hit it right on the head there. So when I blow up, you can refer to this little interview, like, hey, I was here first when he was grinding back up. I got him on his resurgence.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of your resurgence, so what's the career update? Because we haven't seen you since 2019. I was kind of
Oh,
hoping we'd
like
see you
shit.
with the new PFL season, but they're a little bit
Nah.
weird with some of the guys they're signing. So what's the biggest update you can give us?
So, right off, I had shoulder surgery, and then I was out. That took about a year to recover. It's crazy to think it's 2021. So yeah, I haven't fought since summer
Yeah.
of 2019. Kind of scary to think about, but I really went through a lot. Mental growth, physical growth. Right now we are just on call. My manager, I was actually supposed to fight on James Vick's card in Florida, but the guy did not take it, unfortunately. So I'm in that weird pendulum of nobody. I'm a dangerous fight for people who are trying to get to the UFC, or anybody trying to get back to the UFC. And the one thing about MMA that does frustrate me, and it's frustrated me a lot, is on the regional scene, you don't have to fight anyone. If you're not LFA or Titan, everyone's picking and choosing their
Yeah.
opponents. It's not really, oh, you have to fight this guy. Oh, you have to fight this guy. You don't have to fight anyone. So, like, for me, I'm a dangerous opponent for anyone. Where am I worth the risk? That's the thing. So right now I'm just waiting. That's why I'm staying in shape, keeping my weight low, because things I've done in the past, taking a fight on a week's notice, even though I wasn't doing my cardio, but it's because I didn't have a full training camp. I'm doing everything, and just I'm operating as if I'm fighting every week. So I can get a call tomorrow saying today saying, hey, fight tomorrow. I'm ready. I've been on my cardio, I've been keeping my weight low. But outside of that, we're just hoping someone signs the contract. My manager and I'm signed to Sucker Punch, Brian Butler, Brian Hamper. I know they're working things. They have always come through when I least expected it. You
Yeah.
know, the PFL came out of nowhere. My contender series came out of nowhere. So, right now I'm changing my mindset of, um, man, I hope I get a fight here. I'm just saying I'm going to get a fight, and when it comes in due time, I'll be ready. So, right now I'm waiting here. If you know anybody that wants to fight at 155, call your boy. I'm here for you. I'm ready to go. I will pay my own travel. I even told my management I will pay my own travel and for my coaches. That's how much I'm trying to fight. So
Well, what's kind of the expectation for you could fight next? Like, could a short notice UFC, is that realistic? Or right now, is it about kind of rebuilding yourself down in the regional scene or even seeing you at a Bellator? Like, what's realistic for you kind of at this point in your career? Because you are in a very good
right
spot.
Right now, I got the experience of the PFL before, and I've always been a UFC guy. As I gotten older, I think from stressors of my family saying, "Hey, what are you gonna make some real money?" I signed to the PFL. It was a great experience. It really showed me where I wanted to be, but I have to remember my goals of when I got into the sport was to be the UFC champ, and it didn't have that same feel. I did not have the same feel of a UFC event, a UFC like jitters, it
Yeah.
just didn't have that. So I told my management, we had a good chat prior to January that it's UFC now, all in, make that UFC push. So we are hoping for anything and everything, anything we can get. I know right now, last I heard, is they're trying to see if we can get in the LFA. But right now, I know at least signing straight in is probably not going to happen just because um, on books, I'm coming off two straight losses, in the PFL. Though it was in the PFL, it's not as two straight losses on a regional, but it doesn't look the best going straight into the UFC. I know I at least have to get one before I'm even in talks of being on call for the UFC. So, right now it's just about getting one, two, maybe three, whatever we have to do. But I'm just hoping someone signs the paper soon. But I'm just excited about the future. I know I don't know when it's coming. I don't know who it's going to be, but I know someone's getting beat up in 2021 sooner than later. Whether it's next month, next week, or tomorrow, someone's getting these paws soon.
Well, that's gotta be frustrating for you too, because you kind of I mean, obviously, you mentioned you had the injuries, and we see you kind of changing your physique and stuff like that. But it's gotta be frustrating to kind of just sit there, coming off those two losses, which you feel like you could go back out there and get back on the win streak. Like it must be hard to kind of sit on that and just know like there's nothing you can do except wait and just hope that you're ready to go.
Yeah, when I was younger, I did. I got easily frustrated. When you're 24, 25, and you have a college degree, and my sister, my parents, my mom passed away when I was younger. My father was never in my life, but so my sister is like my guardian. She raised me all through high school. So my sister is a lawyer, and her husband works for the FDIC. They're pretty well off. So when you get questions from them like, "Hey, what are you doing with your life? Are you still broke over there?
Yeah.
Hey, are you still trying to be an MMA fighter type of thing?" You do get those stressors, and it kind of weighs on you to the point where you start to question, like, what am I doing? I'm sitting here training every day, and I can't even get a fight. It's been 6 months, and I can't get a fight. But that gets back to me changing my mentality. When I was younger, I would get frustrated, but now that I'm 30. I've been in there with the best. I know where I'm at from a technique standpoint. Even training with Teflon and Sadiq daily, seeing Sadiq crack the top 10, and I'm training with him every day, sparring every day. We've been doing this since we're amateurs. Teflon getting in there and killing these guys. And, our training sparring, it looks like, it's not like I'm in there getting beat up by Teflon or Sadiq. We're giving each other rounds. Some rounds I win, some rounds they win, So that gives me the confidence that I know where I need to be. It's just about changing my mindset. And that's why I said I don't harp on the negatives. The things that I can't change anymore, I'm not harping on it. The fight's gonna come. I'm not using or wasting any negative energy on that. I'm plugging it all into positivity, just staying ready, doing what I can do. So when that phone rings, I am ready to answer the call. I think that's the big thing, is really just changing my mindset and really just being ready. The opportunity is going to come, whether it comes this year, next year. I'm going to be ready when the opportunity comes.
Well, listen, man, this has been a lot of fun. It's been really interesting. I always, I feel like fighters, they bring such a good perspective, and especially on a long form thing, like you get into stuff like you do a 10-minute interview, you're going to tell me you like the matchup and all that stuff. But on a podcast, you can get into more of that mental, here's what I'm doing for this and stuff like that. So it's been super interesting. Before we end it, though, I always like to let the fighter, plug the social media. If you got any sponsors, anything you want to plug and stuff like that, now would be the time.
All right. Everybody follow me on Instagram. I do use Instagram a lot. Why So Serious MMA. I'm trying to I gotta get a check on there. But I am verified on Twitter. You guys can follow me on Twitter at Why So Serious MMA. Facebook, you can friend request me. Just don't be weird. And what I mean by weird is leave little shitty comments because I will unfriend you real quick. And then also I'll plug in my OnlyFans, you guys. If you guys go on my Instagram, I have my OnlyFans link. It's the OnlyFans that you're not going to see me nude. You're going to see betting plays. I am a big gambler. For example, I bet on Jan last night. I called Dominic Cruz last night. Euros Medic. We do pretty good. I have 7 whole followers who get my consulting advice, who are 2 UFC fighters, Sadiq and Stefan. Thanks, homies. But yeah, no, subscribe to my OnlyFans. I really give out betting plays on every UFC card, almost every. I skipped one last week. I think it was kind of a boring card, or I didn't feel like watching too much tape on those guys. But check out my OnlyFans. I like giving out betting advice. I really go into a deeper analysis on why certain fighters should win. If you guys have any questions, you can send me a message on, hey, what do you think about this bet or this bet? Get on there before I blow up and plug this on an ESPN interview and I up the charge. So yeah, there you guys go. I So Serious Consulting on OnlyFans. You're not going to see me nude giving out picks. It's literally just consulting and betting picks and my best plays.
Well, there we go. You guys heard it here first. Thanks so much for the time, man. I really appreciate it. This was great. And for the people that made it all the way to the end, I always appreciate you. Always looks good when they get there. And well, hopefully we'll talk again soon.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, you can have me on. Like I said, when resurgence come, you'll be my first interview prior to signing the UFC. You can mark that right there.
There we go. We're gonna clip it, and then it's gonna be like, yeah, but you said this. There's the
I
proof.
got you. I'm a man of my word. You can ask my woman. I'm a man of my word.
All right, there we go. Thanks.